Hey guys, how you doing today? I'm digging around, looking around, finding news, finding information. I even had a clip ready to go for today, but I found a piece of information that I thought was so shocking that I had to drop everything and come out and do a video about it. So, over the course of this pandemic, we all know about the CERB, and even though the Liberals have cut now the CRB down by about half in their quest to abandon the populace back to the capitalist death cult, right? At least over the pandemic, there was enough support so that people weren't going to be outright evicted. This is, of course, unless you're disabled in Ontario. If you're disabled in Ontario, you got like $100 temporary bump to your already completely inadequate services. People who are on ODSP here in Ontario make maybe $1,200 max. Consider that the average cost of rent now is something like $1,300, plus food, plus utilities, plus all these kinds of things. Plus also the fact that, hey, they're disabled, right? They have all kinds of associated costs with being disabled. And you realize that here in Ontario, we basically say fuck the poor, fuck the disabled, and abandon them as readily as we possibly can, right? Now, as if this wasn't bad enough, I find a little tidbit of information. Turns out that there is an equine relief program that the Ford administration released over the pandemic. And guess what that is? That's literally giving money to horses to make sure that the horses are well taken care of. And that's all sweet and nice and everything, but guess how much money they're giving to horses? $2,500, right? That means that the Ford administration values horses more than it does the human beings who are disabled and incapable of working. While I let that percolate in your brain, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon down below. Please consider donating $1 if you've got one jangling around your pocket. And I've got a live stream, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to come on in. We've got a great community going on where we're steadily building a pushback from the left against these fascists who are outright abandoning our disabled, right? And to make matters worse, as if it wasn't bad enough to be told straight out by the Ford administration that your life is less valuable than a horse, there's this push going on from the Ford administration recently where they're pushing to get the disabled back to work, right? What they are going to do, and it's very obvious to anyone who's been paying attention, is that they are going to cut the meager supports that exist already in order to force people who live in wheelchairs, people who are blind, people who are arthritis ridden, people who can't stand up, people who are crippled and disabled, right? Disabled, who literally cannot work, who cannot participate in the workforce. The Ford administration is going to cut their services further in order to force these people who are born with disabilities, force these people who maybe are injured by the course of being alive in a world that does that from time to time. And he is going to force these people off of social assistance because he is a rapacious sociopath who wants to give that money to horses. And in the quest to force these people into the capitalist death cult, well, what do you think that's going to look like? Do you think these capitalists are going to welcome these disabled people with open arms and say of them, oh, here are your well-paying jobs, here are the jobs with benefits, here are the jobs that actually are going to be able to pay for your bills and pay for your concerns, pay for all of these things? Or do you think that the capitalist death cultists are going to say, you are extremely vulnerable and weak, I can pay you whatever I want, and you have to take it Because if you don't, you'll be discarded onto the streets. Which one of those two scenarios do you think is actually more legitimate? Which one of those two scenarios do you think is actually going to happen to these disabled people who, incidentally, once again, it must be stated, cannot work? That's the definition of being disabled. And the Ford administration's childish, sycophantic, sociopathic statements that they're going to force people off of disability so that they can go get jobs is terrifying. And it should terrify all of us, because if that's what they're going to do to our disabled, that's what they're going to do to us. It's very clear. There's a reason why I'm organizing a protest August 21st, 11 a.m. Yonge and Dundas Square here in Toronto. Come on down, please come on down. We need as many people there as we can possibly get. There's a reason we're organizing these protests, because we are abandoning our poor and our disabled, and we are doing it. Why? So that we can give extra money to horses. This is really where we're at. This is really where we're at. That horses have more value to Doug Ford than disabled people do. And this is just a long history of the Fords. How they've managed to convince these gullible rubes that they are of the common folk, that they are the common man, is astounding to me. It's actually a work of political genius, if you ask me, to convince people who are being crushed under the boot of capital, to convince people who are like construction workers and people who actually work, unlike fat ass Ford who sits on his ass drinking Timmy's and eating donuts all day, that he is one of them, that he cares about them while he actively works to abandon them, so that he can ensure that horses, horse racing, horseback riding, all of these sorts of things, so that these activities, the real common man activities, can be maintained. And in the end, perhaps it is just as simple as that. Maybe it really is that Doug Ford just really likes to bet on the ponies, right? Maybe it is a common man thing. Maybe he just wants to go down and bet on the ponies, and he's willing to spend more money to do that than he is to keep homeless people, to keep disabled people off the streets. We live in a very strange time where we believe that we are a culture of moral conscience when we are not. We are a denigrated, childish, barbarian culture, a pretend society that is like a parody, is like a satire of an actual society. It's very difficult to believe that a real culture would actively abandon its disabled the way that we are. It's very difficult to believe that a real culture would actually actively abandon its disabled and its poor the way that we have. As there are cultures all throughout Europe who say, oh no, we can just eliminate poverty. We can just eliminate these concerns. We can build it into our society to ensure that people cannot fall down below a certain level, certainly if they are disabled. But we're far too childish. We're far too disconnected. We're far too sociopathic and bought out by a capitalist death cult that's doing everything it can to abandon us so that they can get more imaginary numbers in their offshore bank accounts. These are sad and dark times, made even sadder by the thought that over 20% of the populace supports this. One in four people in your society are walking around saying, yes, let's abandon the poor and the disabled. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. That the way to deal with disabled people is not to acknowledge that they are disabled and then take responsibility for them as good social and civic stewards. No, the solution is to abandon them. I don't accept that, and I hope you don't either. Well, once again, you've reached the end of the video. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. If you've got $1 jangled around your pocket, please be sure to send it my way. You are a divine being, standing in divine energy. These guys spend hundreds of billions of dollars to gaslight you and to convince you that you are something other than what you are, instead of spending even a penny to help you, even as you are at your weakest. It's despicable, and we shouldn't let them. Good luck. We're gonna need it.